Hi, everyone. Welcome. So, I'm Diana Baik. I am a master's student in social work, and today I'll be interviewing Jason Docton, who is the founder of Rise Above the Disorder. So, Rise Above the Disorder is an amazing organization. Jason's going to tell you more about it, but they are Shipping's charitable partner for the month of December. So, we're here today to raise some awareness around mental health and Rise Above Disorder and hopefully some funds. So, hi, Jason. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well today. I'm really excited to be talking to you because Rise Above the Disorder, it sounds like you're an organization that you deal with issues that are really near and dear to my heart. So I'm wondering if you could just tell everyone about Rise Above Disorder and what your overall mission is.
Sure. So Rise Above the Disorder, or RAD, um, the whole goal is to make mental health care accessible and affordable. I think we live in a time where we're becoming increasingly aware that freedom is not found necessarily fighting in conflicts overseas. It's not found in accumulating as much wealth as possible. Freedom is being able to communicate who we are, being able to identify in the ways that we choose. Freedom is having access to education. Freedom is having access to income. Freedom is having equal opportunities in life. And for RAD, our major focal point is this freedom of mental health care, that this is something that we as human beings simply deserve to have access to. And that's what we're trying to make possible.
That's really amazing. So, talk to us about how your origin story, how you guys started Rise Above the Disorder, which can I call it RAD?
Yeah,
Okay,
plus,
yeah, how
please.
you started RAD, and then yeah, kind of how you started coming about this like importance of mental health care for yourself and the organization.
Sure. A lot of this really just begins in my own life, just way too suddenly. Um, I was working my way through med school, and I had my first panic attack.
Wow.
Um, you know, I'm on the ambulance maybe like 12 hours at a time, and then rush to school to go through and cram as much as that I can, and then back in it, just this endless cycle of pushing myself to a limit that I didn't expect to have. And that panic attack really changed everything. I noticed that every time, I was on the ambulance, I felt like I couldn't breathe. My chest was really tight and heavy. And I would go to school, and every time I was sitting down in class, I would be thinking about, how tight and heavy my chest was feeling again. I had just enough medical knowledge to realize that something was really wrong, but not enough to realize like this is probably not real. Like, this isn't a real heart attack this time. This isn't me suffocating. There's something else here.
Mhm.
And in my mind, it was this endless chase to figure out what it was. When I decided to become a doctor, my thought process was always doctors are almost like Batman, like you're a detective in a sense. You've got to figure out what's going on. Um, I always loved that. You get just these little bits and pieces of symptoms, and you're supposed to figure out very rapidly, quickly, what could be uh, harming this person, or making them uncomfortable. Um, so for me to take that process and apply it towards myself with anxiety layered on top became very exhaustive.
So
My
that's what you figured was going on for you was anxiety.
Yep, my well, almost got there. My conclusion was that I was allergic to something, and I was experiencing anaphylaxis, this severe allergic reaction. That's why I couldn't breathe very well. That's why my limbs felt tingly. It was something that I was eating. And so, in my wisdom, I just slowly started eliminating foods from my diet, and then slowly eliminated any kind of eating. Um, stopped really being able to take care of myself, stopped being
Wow.
able to work, stopped being able to go to school, um, and eventually developed what we'll call agoraphobia, this fear of leaving a safe place, and specifically my home. Um, in my mind, I was doing everything that I could to protect myself from whatever was harming me.
Mhm.
But anxiety is really great about removing anything in our life that causes that same discomfort or even hints at that level of discomfort. And so, in that isolation, I began to live a very different life.
Yeah,
Um,
that sounds
it,
so challenging. Like, I
yeah,
really
yeah.
commend you for it. Seems like you've gotten, on the other side of it.
Eventually, yeah, yeah. But it took a long time. Um, the beginning of Rad is actually as this World of Warcraft guild, this video game guild, um, where it was myself and a couple of other people who also had really bad anxiety, attempting to help other people with really bad anxiety,
Wow.
because anybody who struggles with mental health seems to have this draw to help other people, while not necessarily helping themselves, and that's exactly what we did. um, Helped as many people as we could, tried to talk with as many people as we could in hopes that they wouldn't get to the same level that we were. Um,
Wow.
yeah, it was an interesting approach. Um, and as we talked with more and more people, as more and more people found us online, there was this reoccurring theme. Um, it didn't really matter how much we could get into those conversations. Ultimately, you really wanted to sit down with a professional. But even if you wanted to sit down and see a professional, you had to be able to afford that professional, or you needed to have insurance. Um, and most people simply did not. So we put our heads together to think, well, this is the biggest barrier now. What can we possibly do? And so we're effectively crowdfunding people's mental health care, and just doing this day in and day out. It was working. I mean, we could find somebody, a really cool therapist to see wherever they were, because gaming is inherently global. We were just finding therapists anywhere in the world somebody lived, and then it became a very simple process of like, well, we think you'd be a good therapist. They think you'd be a good therapist. Here's the money. You should see them. And most of these therapists were like, that's a little sketchy, but sure, I'll take that. I'll take it. Um, and we just kept doing that over and over and over again. We didn't think about it from a nonprofit perspective. We didn't think about it from this is a career, or this is something that will expand. We just did this very basic piece because it seemed like the only thing we could do.
Wow, that is incredible. It sounds like you really did help a lot of people, and it's so interesting that it came out of this essentially online community, right?
Yeah, just a bunch of gamers trying to figure out what to do. Um, it continued like that for a very brief time, before we would eventually get discovered by a couple of online content creators and some very special fans of theirs. This content creator was live streaming their video game playing, and came across what we were doing, thought it was a really cool idea, and
Mm.
started talking about it with some of his friends and some of his community. Um, so they decided they wanted to do some fundraising for us, and of course, the first question is, okay, so like, what is your nonprofit status? Like, can you send us that information? And we're like, we're like just a video game guild. We don't have any of that. And they're like, oh, well, like, how do people know where the money goes? And we're just like, where else would the money go? Like, we didn't really even think of that. We were just, it wasn't something where we were expecting to pay ourselves. We just saw a problem and wanted to solve it.
Wow.
But we became a nonprofit to fundraise with them. And then the surprise to us was the community they were talking to. Some of their fans were this really popular band at the time who also wanted to join the fundraiser. And so as we prepared to put all of this together, we realized that band is Imagine Dragons, and they want to fundraise for what we're doing. And we're
Wow,
just like, oh,
incredible.
yeah.
Cool.
Oh, that's an interesting surprise. Yeah, we'll get this nonprofit thing figured out real quick, and they fundraise for us. We become a nonprofit, and we set out on this mission to spend all of that money as quickly as possible, paying for people's therapy.
Wow. So, how long have you been doing that for now, and how did you start expanding past kind of like the gaming community, like
Mhm.
to other people who might have different backgrounds?
I want to say we've been doing this since 2011 or so.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, yeah, almost 10 years.
Yeah, a considerable amount of time now that I look back on it. Took us a while to become a nonprofit, but um, as we built a lot of this and became a little bit more structured, there was a key moment that led us off to realize that what we were doing was for more than just people who joined our guilds in one game.
Mhm.
Um, we effectively had spent all of the money that Imagine Dragons and some of the gaming community had raised. We managed to pay for about 3,000 people's mental health care. So it was, I mean, we had a decent impact with it. Um, and then after all of the chaos of creating these applications, finding all of these therapists, paying for all of this therapy, we were like, all right, let's just go back to playing video games. Like this, that was great. We're shut-ins. Like we haven't left home in years. Let's just go back to just that, I guess. Um, and so that's what we did. We effectively closed everything. We didn't file any further paperwork for the nonprofit. We didn't bother to keep anything running. Eventually, the nonprofit gets suspended because nobody's
Wow.
filing paperwork. Um, we just we did the thing. We were done. Um, and occasionally, people would find a way to reach out to us. They'd ask us if we were still helping, if we were still covering costs, and we'd let them know, like, no, we're all finished. That was the thing we did, but we're done. But we had somebody reach out that we just couldn't ignore. Somebody that we had to help.
Mhm.
Um, there was this 19-year-old kid that had reached out to us, and he lived just out in the middle of nowhere on the East Coast, and um, he wrote this email to us on a library computer, and the email was just beyond tragic to me. Um, I guess he lived in this family home with his parents, with his grandparents. It was just them. That was the only family. Um, and one day they wanted to go out to dinner, as a family, and he decides to stay home, play video games, like most 19-year-olds would do. Um, and so they head out, the parents and the grandparents, but they never return.
Oh my God.
And he later hears that night from the sheriff's department that they were in a car accident, and they didn't make it, didn't survive. Um, and so, at 19, it didn't really know what to do. There's no other family, um, so he just stayed in that house, um, thinking that something would happen, that somebody would show up, or maybe they'd actually just come home, and it wasn't real. Um, and he stayed for months, months and months and months, until
So
finally the bank realized, like, hey, nobody's paying this mortgage. Oh, there's nobody alive to pay this mortgage. All right, we're foreclosing on the home. And then he becomes homeless. And he tells us all of this in this email, and says, look, I just want to die. what do I do? We're like, well, okay. I go back to the rest of this group that we have, and we're still just playing video games. And I'm like, look, we have to do the one thing that we do other than play games, right? Like let's help them. Um, and so I write back and I said, look, we'll help. We're going to do what we can. Hang tight. We start looking for therapists. There aren't any where he lives. We start looking for therapists in the major city near him, but a lot of these therapists are telling us like, he needs a lot, like grief counseling. It sounds like he's got anxiety issues. Also, he's home, like maybe
Yeah,
look
yeah.
for more. So we find a treatment center. We find like an inpatient situation that he can go to, but they want $10,000 for him to get started because he doesn't have insurance. And so, um, over the course of maybe a couple of weeks, I'm calling this place, negotiating with them, trying to bring that price down. I eventually get them to agree to see him for $1,000 plus an introduction to Imagine Dragons, which I don't have, but I put that bluff out there to see if they would go for it, and they did. Um, and we reached back out to this 19-year-old, and we let him know like, this is what's going on, this is what we're trying to do. Um, are you up for this? And he is. You know,
Wow, that's
so
incredible. But I mean, I'm sure you could let us know how he's doing. But like, I'm sure that sounds really life changing for him, right?
that was the hope that we could fix that we could put this together. By being scrappy, we could fix this injustice. Um, um, but we couldn't. And as we began to try and fundraise this money, this $1,000, we had realized um, we had no idea how to fundraise money. Like we got lucky before. Um, when we were doing this crowdfunding, effectively what we were doing was selling stuff within this game. But because we had become a legal entity, we could no longer do that because it's kind of a legal gray area. Um, and we struggled. Um, we raised maybe $285 in a week, but that was mostly us putting our disability and social service checks together after 500 a month when you're trying to pay for rent and food, and that's not rent or food for anybody anywhere.
Right.
um, so we had very little. uh, we went to Facebook, we asked friends and family, and we got to 600. Maybe in the third week or so we got to roughly 800. um, and we got a call from one of his friends on their cell phone, and sometimes he's able to stay at this friend's house, sometimes he can use his phone, but it's really off and on. And so we were excited to talk with him and update him, let him know we were real close. But his friend that had called had let us know that this 19-year-old that we had set off to help had actually taken his life.
Oh gosh.
Um, at this point, he had been dealing with this grief, struggling with the homelessness, and just suffering for a very long time. Um, and even though we were racing against time to try and crowdfund mental health care for him, um, that was just a lot to live with. Um,
Yeah, that's sounds really, really heavy. So, how did that kind of change or affect what you were doing as an organization?
right. I mean, we saw that as kind of the ultimate failure. For me, it was internalized. I'd already been suffering with my mental health.
Yeah.
I didn't want to keep suffering in this way. Um, but I had helped a lot of people, and that kind of kept me going. But when we reached this one person that we couldn't help, it to me seemed like, oh, okay, that's like the sign, right? Like it's my life is over too. Um, and at some point, I think in grieving for him and thinking about my own life and my own meaning and purpose, I just got angry, really angry. Angry initially that we couldn't fundraise $1,000
Mhm.
between a community that had spent, nearly or really more in the hundreds of thousands and eventually millions to help people prior. Um, I just couldn't wrap my head around how we had failed so miserably. But then I got angry at this mental health clinic. Why did we have to negotiate from $10,000 to 1,000? Why didn't they care about him in the way that we did? We dropped everything to try and help him.
Mhm.
This is literally their job. Um, we just couldn't figure it out, and eventually that anger gets centered on this whole system is broken. This person was suffering and nobody helped them. Every safety net, every increase in access that we boast as a society failed somebody who deserved so much better than this, who had done nothing to anybody and somehow fell through the cracks. Um, this isn't acceptable. We have to do something to change this. Um, if this isn't going to be something that we can expect the world to provide us, it's something that we have to create, and that's what we set off to do. Let's let's make universal mental health care a thing. Um, Medicare for all doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon, so let's just do it ourselves. And that's what we landed on. We changed our name to Rad eventually, something that was a little bit more general, and we focused on anybody that could find us, anybody that we could find.
Mhm.
It's still very much centered in gaming. It's the only place we were really good at fundraising at this point, but um, that moment challenged us. That moment gave us motivation. That moment took something very painful, um, and we were able to convert that into what we had wanted for them, what we wanted and maybe even needed for ourselves, what
Yeah.
so many people seem to need, and that exists within gaming, outside of gaming. It is, again, even where this all started. To me, it's a human right.
I agree with you, and thank you so much for sharing that story. It's really amazing how you were kind of able to transform so much of, I'm sure there was a lot of sadness, there was a lot of grief, anger, even, and being able to transform that into this very positive, charitable cause. And yeah, I really do think that mental health care is a human right. And I'm so glad that Rise Above the Disorder is, you know, touting this as something that's really important. So I'm curious, what are your current goals and plans? Like, what are you working on right now?
A lot of it for us is still this journey of being a nonprofit, um, internal restructuring. This is actually the first year um, that anybody has been paid. So we have like paid staff, which we never expected to have. Um, and so that's been really interesting, and what that has brought. People who have skill sets that can reach and expand our mission, who can fundraise and make it possible for us to help more people.
Mhm.
That has been a kind of like a continued evolution. Um, our main goal at this point, and to me has always been kind of at the center of the vision that we have at RAD, um, is to open up a very large scale facility where mental health care remains free. The expectation of a bill or having to pay for any kind of services is completely removed. What St. Jude does for children who have cancer is effectively what we want to do for mental health care. There is no bill. This just is what you deserve. Um, I mean, we've been able to help just shy of 37,000 people have free mental health care. With this center, we would still continue to pay for people's therapy around the world, but I think this world really needs a beacon. It needs a physical entity that stands for what it believes in, and that's what we're challenged and have challenged ourselves to create.
That's amazing. That's like such a huge change to make. So that's awesome. So how can people donate? How can they get involved?
Yeah, the best ways to get involved with RAD right now are through social. Um, Pretty much everywhere. Twitter is our most active. We are URAD or YOUARERAD.
Mhm.
The social side, it's the validation. It's the social proof that this idea, that this effort is important to people, that this is something that we want in our culture, that this new generation is trying to make this happen. For those that have the ability to donate, right now on our website, yourrad.org, we have a monthly giving program, which helps us in so many ways to to set expectations financially of how many more people we can add to our program, because therapy is an ongoing process. So we want to be able to make sure that each session is taken care of, and that there's no risk of a hard stop because of financial difficulty. So the monthly giving is really important to us. And with that, we usually share stories of some of the people that your donations help, what their life was like prior to this and how their life is now, that they don't have to think about or dream about this luxury of feeling well again. They simply have that access. This is their life now.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So for everyone who is watching this, I hope that you think about donating and getting involved with the cause. Um, Gosh, I'm sad that we have to end the interview because I have like so many more things that I want to ask you. But thank you so much for sharing the stories, spending your time here. Is there anything else that you might want to leave us with or let us know about RAD or about mental health in general?
I think about mental health in general, for sure. Um, One of the strangest things in my experience um, is that no matter how bad my mental health got, um, this no longer eating, this not being able to take care of myself, this not being able to even leave home. Um, when I got help, when I eventually got help, um, it brought me to a point where I can't even really remember what it feels like to have been so unwell. Um, that's really hard for a lot of people to imagine. Life without depression, life without anxiety, life without suffering. And somehow through treatment, through getting help, you have the ability to live a life where you can no longer even understand or relate to how much you once suffered. So for those that are really questioning if they could ever feel well again, if they could ever get better, I mean, everybody's journey is very unique, and I can't necessarily speak to how someone's journey will play out. But for me, um, it has just become something so empowering and something so powerful in my own life to be able to look back at, and have learned from. And I hope everybody will give themselves that opportunity to try, um, to seek out these resources through RAD or anywhere else, and hopefully live a life where they too cannot even relate to that previous suffering.
seems like you really came out on the other side creating some really positive change. So thank you for that and for promoting, like basically universal mental health care. It's, really great. Thanks again for the conversation. And yeah, make sure you guys go check out Rise Above Disorder and donate.